Good morning.
Morning. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Yeah. Last one in June.
Yeah, it's like this month, whew, it feels like a blur. All the places I've been in my head, literally.
Right. I'm sure literally, metaphorically, emotionally. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, yeah,
Agreed. And we just kind of settled on how do we go beyond or move away from the binary in terms of any and all issue, not just the things we think about when we think about binaries. Yeah.
yeah. Maybe it's helpful if we think about a couple of things we've been thinking about this month where this comes up and we can see where the energy goes.
Yeah. Definitely. Do you wanna start? You want me to?
Yeah. I guess for me, if I think about examples of moving away from the binary, which I so think of as a muscle, because I feel like our brains automatically want to go to the binary. It like in some ways creates some safety or some anchoring. So I think about thinking about gender when it comes to one of my kids, and like part of my brain that wants to make it like neat
Mm,
and yet
making
it's going to
it.
be really messy. That's what I've learned in the last month. It's going to be really messy and fluid, and maybe we don't even have the words for it yet. And so just sitting in that and being okay. I think about this book I listened to last week, called All the White Friends I Couldn't Keep. And I feel like the last couple of years, I've really been examining my relationship with white people, which includes my spouse, my spouse's family. And, what does that mean? Because there are so many amazing white people in my life, and yet they're not all doing the work of anti-racism, anti-oppression, and moving away from the binary. So I think about that. And then I just think about the messiness of family relationships, right? And the people who disappoint us, and how my brain wants to make them a villain in my story, and how I have to keep saying, nope, there are multiple truths here. They have their own worldview and experiences. So I think that's kind of some of where I've been at. It takes a lot of effort to like try to hold the multiple truths.
So much effort. Your point that you just kind of cruised by, but it's so important about our brains just want to default to the binary, right? Like because of how they're actually structured.
Yeah.
That's the first layer. And then we introduce all these other layers in terms of
Mhm.
society and systems of oppression and whatever, but that our brains are designed to do that. I just cannot be understated, right? And it's always a helpful reminder to me because it's like, right, this is like fighting gravity. This is a
Mhm.
muscle that needs to be constantly worked because it's like
Right.
it is fighting gravity.
Mhm.
Um, yes. And making it neat. Oh my gosh, I feel like we'll talk about that a lot. But for me, this has been showing up lately in my battles with Western medicine, throughout my whole life, just feeling like this is what the system I'm stuck with, and feeling like a victim of that, but feeling like I don't have any other choices. And so it's this, I have to do what they tell me, that's the only option I have, or I'm just gonna like ignore this problem for a while. And that's not, so just this
Mhm.
constantly feeling stuck between two shitty choices, both of which make me feel like I don't have agency. They make me feel like a victim, whatever. And finally moving to functional medicine, which I feel like is moving beyond the binary.
Mhm.
Um, and how lovely and what an affirming experience that has been.
So I'm
Um,
curious about what have you found is different about functional medicine versus like traditional medicine, Western medicine?
Western for me, and I obviously this is just my experience, but for me, Western medicine has skewed very symptom focused. We just focus on problems and the symptoms that those problems are generating, and we work to reduce symptoms, or we catch illness and disease. Whereas my entire being is always about what is the root issue, what is the origin. And functional medicine is about, let's find the root cause. Let's deal with the origin. We're not just concerned about symptoms. The symptoms are a piece of data to help us figure out what is at the root of this and how do we deal with that, and how do we prevent problems? How do we work toward optimal health rather than just the reduction of disease and illness? Which is, it's just
amazing. Yeah. Yeah. Like I wish everybody had access to that.
Yes, exactly. Oh my gosh. And that's a whole other thing. That's a whole other rabbit hole in terms of the money that it costs and the lack of accessibility and that's a whole other thing. But I've also been thinking about this a lot in terms of my sexuality and how that intersects with the institution of marriage, right? That we've been given this, we're either married and monogamous or we're divorced. And it's like, well, that's like a really tricky arrangement, I think, for a lot of people. But it's so hard to even explore what the other options are because it's so triggering, because this is the binary that we've been told is normal, standard, and whatever. Yeah. And neurodivergence too. That's been coming up in terms of we default to everybody is neurotypical, and we don't even know anything about, there's so little we know about neurodivergence, what it looks like. And I'm starting to explore how OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, for our folks who aren't in psych, how obsessive compulsive disorder, we've got some reason to believe that that's an aspect of neurodivergence. And there's a lot of intersection there between OCD and autism that I've never heard almost anyone talk about, but people are talking about this, but they're not being centered. They're not being understood, and it's so hard. Yeah. So those are a few of the binaries that I've been thinking about a lot that have really been tripping me up.
Yeah. And I've also been curious about like the intersection of neurodivergence and queerness. Like that there's a lot of overlap there. So it's, I just think about how much things have changed just even in the last decade, like what we are beginning to know and lean into. And it makes me think about how the binary feels so safe for people, right? Like if I think about the charge and the churning and the polarization in our country, and I think it's like the cross between those who are like rooted, grounded, anchored in like traditional ways that they've been brought up, and that it's either this or it's that. And then the others who by choice or by circumstance have like leaned into this other, whether it's they're born neurodivergent or they're born queer or they evolve into queerness or whatever it might be. Even moving from being not racist to anti-racist, like all of these things of like, I feel like we don't have enough skills to be able to talk about this stuff. And so then we stay in our silos, right? And I think about what it feels like in my body when I'm talking to someone who totally has a totally different worldview than I do. And the effort it takes to engage them in a conversation in a way that feels relational. Not I'm right, you're wrong, not there's only one truth, right? Yeah. And yet that it's still about liberation, because sometimes people's truth is oppressive to the most vulnerable among us. And I'm not buying into that, while I can still, hold them with grace and dignity.
Yes. And I think depending on the issues being discussed, right, that's like can be easier or harder depending on the identities that we hold. Yeah, so that's holding grace for folks who think differently than us is a big topic I would love to explore. in terms of people's aversion to anything that's not the binary, or really people's aversion to anything that's novel or different, that also is kind of organically built in, right, in our brains, in terms of like our
Right.
brains want to easily categorize it. If you don't fit into
Sure.
the boxes that we've been given, the brain
Right.
is it just gets a little gummed up. And so this is like fighting gravity too. So I've been thinking a lot. I went to Pride Parade yesterday. And it's always just such a beautiful place to be, because there are so many aspects of difference
Hmm.
represented there. And there's so much love and acceptance, and not tolerating difference, celebrating difference.
Yeah. And that
And
feels so different. That vibe is so different.
yes, and it's so beautiful. I want to like, how do we make the world that? And it gets me emotional.
Mm.
And one of the major barriers, it seems, is people's aversion to difference, to novelty. So I've been
Mhm.
thinking so much about what's my role, and obviously continuing to flex that muscle for myself. But how do we, you and I, we as a society, whatever, how do
Yeah.
we help people flex that muscle of, I see something that's different or new and it makes me uncomfortable. How do I not retreat
Mm.
into judgment of myself, judgment
Mm.
of that person? How do I stay in this messy middle of curiosity or
Mhm.
I don't know. How do we help
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it was last year I was reading um, Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart, something like
Yeah.
that,
Yeah. Yeah.
like which is just a book about emotions.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated the chapter about curiosity. And that curiosity is not like we tend to be curious about the things that matter to us. Right. And so, like, I think about the things that you and I are curious about, other people aren't curious about. So they're not going to
You're right.
learn new things, listen to a podcast, like have conversations with other people, go to Pride Parade, like whatever it is. And so if I think about if people are not curious, we can't force that curiosity
No.
on them. And so then, like, sometimes I like have these moments of hopelessness that I try not to feed, right? Because, I like Mariam Kaba's talk about hope is a discipline, it's a practice, something we have to cultivate. And so for me, what was helpful last week is I was running this workshop on racial literacy. And I was, talking about this book, All the White People I Couldn't Keep, all the White Friends I Couldn't Keep. And what I appreciated he talked about in his book, it was Black man. And he was talking about activists or people who are trying to make the world better, that we only need 3.5% of the people to
Mhm.
be like the anti-racist people or the anti-oppressive people. We only need 3.5% of people doing that, and 50% of the people being like passive supporters. And so like that was really helpful for me to think in terms of, okay, so if 50% are going to be passive supporters, can that help me have more compassion? Like that this has been going on
I see.
forever, right? Like
Yeah.
if we think about, I don't know, like the support of gay marriage or the end of slavery, like probably it was 3.5% people saying, we got to do
Right.
this.
Leading the
50%,
charge.
50% who were like, I'll go with it, but I'm not going to do much. And then, whatever, 47%, 46% that are like, no. Right. And so like, that's been the way humans are. Think about countries where there are revolts and revolutions. It's all the same. And so that helps me shift a bit to kind of think, okay, maybe I don't have to let all of these people go. I just need to recalibrate in my mind, like what they care about. And and how can I be in relationship with them? Because if I'm not in relationship with them, then who will they be in relationship with who are not going to be having these conversations with them, or they won't have proximity to a different way of being in the world.
And that's that whole idea of proximity to difference, I think, is such a huge point. You're right. If people don't have identities that they're then curious about or passionate about or invested in, that make them want to learn and listen and be curious, right? Like, then that organic curiosity is not there. Which again, that I'm like, oh God,
Right.
then what do we do? But you're right. But it's, if there is proximity to difference, if this is moving beyond the binary, right?
Right.
This
Yeah.
is multiple truths, right? Because I'm always like, we don't tolerate difference, we celebrate difference, but not everybody is going to celebrate difference.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So perhaps proximity to difference
Mm-hmm.
is part of how, and people then tolerating difference
Right.
is part of how that muscle is grown
Mm-hmm.
in folks where there is not organic curiosity.
Yeah. Yeah. Which then makes me like, that's the revolution in some ways. Like, how do we desegregate? Because I think too much segregation makes people like not meet people of different like social classes or different races or different religions or different ethnicities. Like, what would it mean if like one person took their friend to a pride parade or to like this cultural event or this museum or this TED talk or whatever it might be? And like, how do we get more proximity to difference? And, you know, we're in a time period where there is so much fear around difference that we are banning books, that we are not wanting to teach the accurate history of the United States, all of its complexity. Like, we are going back to, I'm teaching this history and systems class this summer, and I was looking at the 1979 standards of care for people who are transitioning or wanting to affirm their gender. Okay. And like, we're going, in some states, we're going back to the 1979 standards of care versus the 2012 standards of care. Like, so like this idea of there's so much fear that we want to go back to a different time period where people were more closeted, more oppressed, or certain people were more closeted, more oppressed.
And this is, yeah, that is terrifying. That's terrifying and awful. And it's hijacking a little to think about. But again, I think this is where for those of us who consider ourselves to be more progressive or marginalized in some way, this is the power of moving beyond the binary of like, how do we cancel culture can maybe sometimes cancel culture is holding people accountable for the actions that they've done, right? And sometimes cancel culture is not helpful because we remove all of the people who could stay a part of this person's life, who could, yeah, and that's problematic. And so this idea of like, we don't even associate with this person, or we don't even have like, we cut this person out of our life. It's like, there are multiple, sometimes that is necessary and sometimes it can be detrimental.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think about this in terms of, if you are a person with a marginalized identity, you have to decide for yourself, like, what's your capacity? Right. What's your care? Like, can you continue to be in relationship with some of these people who aren't curious about your worldview or are maybe causing you some level of harm? So like, a concrete example for me is, so I've been part of this psychology board the last couple of years, and it's all white. I'm the only person who's not white. And I've struggled with their lack of commitment to anti-racism, but I literally think they don't even know what that means. right? Like, I think they're really caught up in like, we're trying to be not racist and we want to diversify because we realize this is a predominantly white psychological association. And part of me wants to break up with them, right? And which is my version of canceling.
Sure.
I think breaking up with them is my version of canceling. And I was sitting there yesterday and we met at this like golf course in Princeton. And when I was driving into it, I thought, wow, my ancestors wouldn't have been allowed to be here.
Yeah.
Like,
Oof.
and if they were allowed to be here, they would have been servants or enslaved. Right. And I knew it was a white space where I couldn't even acknowledge that out loud because they wouldn't, like, I would have disrupted politeness. Right. Because I would have named something that is true,
right.
but
then makes everybody so uncomfortable.
Right. Because it's not an anti-racist space. They haven't built the literacy, the agility, the fluency. So I kept that to myself, which, you know, made me not come as my full self.
Yeah.
And we were at some point talking about, they watched this movie, like this, they had this like movie night that I opted not to go to because they were going to talk about anti-Semitism and racism, anti-Blackness. And I knew I would, if I wasn't the only Black person, I would have won, would have been a real like small number. And that space would have been harmful because a bunch of people who have not done enough of this work will say things that are harmful to people of color, right? Just like if we're talking about queerness in a room full of straight cis people, they don't even know that they're doing microaggressions, that they're unpacking it. It's going to be harmful to the people who it's their lived experience. And I think like I think the thing sometimes is I recognize that me being on this board helps them evolve. And I also have to temper how I'm in relationship with them because they have a lot of work to do that they don't maybe even know that they have a lot of work to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there's so many things I want to say about what you just said. But the fragility, right? And in this example, you're talking about white fragility, but I think the concept of fragility in terms of when people have things that they need to learn or unlearn, the amount of fragility that brings up, whether that's about race, whether that's about sexuality, whatever it's about, helping people just get more comfortable being uncomfortable, helping people not feel like they've got to know it all, or that simply because they have some biases, like that doesn't mean that they are X, like that, moving away from, if I have this thought, then I'm a bad person, therefore I need to be defensive about it. And then that's going to put me in blame or shame. And then I'm going to fall back into the binary of you're the bad guy or I'm the bad guy. And if I'm the bad guy enough, then sooner or later, you're going to be I'm going to make you the bad guy. Yes, I really, really wish I need to learn for myself what's my role in and helping people grow that muscle of what's the opposite of fragility, resilience, bravery, courage.
All those things. All those things.
All those things are required, right?
And I mean, to me, that would be a real gift, right? If we had an understanding in our culture that unexamined privilege likely leads to defensiveness or lack of fluency or knowledge or ignorance of some sort. And that even if you don't have and also if we live fairly segregated lives, meaning like we don't have a lot of encounters with people who are different than us, then likely there will be things that we are unaware of. And how do we begin to think like, well, maybe I'm not living the fullest life because maybe I'm not meeting enough people who are different than me. And at the same time, can I also accept that some people really want to live that kind of, self-contained life?
Self-contained life. That was a good phrasing.
Yeah, I was
Um,
like, let me find a kinder way to say this.
Low clap there. That was,
Yeah.
yeah, really good. No, that's so true. And I've noticed that I've recently been guilt of self-containing when it comes to men. For a long time now, Nick has been really like the only man I'm willing to deal with. And I've really I found kind of written off most of the gender, which is, I'm not proud of that. That's just where I've been. So any opportunity, it's like, do you want a male or female massage therapist? I'm like, oh, female. All of my doctors are like, I have surrounded myself my entire practice used to be exclusively women. We are diversifying there too. But it's only recently where my new functional medicine doctor is a man. I really needed, I've been having tremendous neck pain because I'm not taking care of myself. And the only options were male massage therapists. And I was like, I can do this. I can be alone in a room with a man. And it was a fascinating experience. It was a reminder of that there are some, I think, gender differences in terms of how one operates in the world that, and it was, I actually appreciated being in those spaces with men and the different perspective they were able to provide. And when my male functional medicine doctor affirmed me, it felt different. It felt even better, I think, because it was like, oh, we don't have this aspect of sameness. You are different. And I have all these negative assumptions about how you might perceive me. And the fact that you are validating and affirming me regardless of our difference means more even. So it wound up being emotionally corrective.
Yeah, it sounds so healing.
It was so healing, and that feels dramatic to say, but it's how it felt. It felt real healing, and it was a reminder to me that I am maybe in a space where I need to be less self-contained in terms of how I let men in my life.
It's interesting you say this. I've been noticing these casual encounters I've been having with white guys, older white guys. I've been tracking it for like the last 6 or 9 months, like these random either acts of kindness or interactions. And I've been noting it because I don't think I interact enough with white guys. Particularly the last 3 years where I've been doing so much anti-racism work. They don't tend to come unless they're forced by some employer. They don't tend to come to anti-racism workshops. So and so these like like a random example, a couple weeks ago, I was walking on a walking trail nearby my house early in the morning, and these 2 white guys were fishing, and they stopped me to like show me like that they were about to catch a really big fish. And like, it was so fun to be in their joy, and like that they wanted to share this with me. I got to see them like take it out. I took a picture, and I was like, these random encounters with strangers, particularly who are white in this racial reckoning like time period, like meant so much to me.
I bet.
Of like these things of like, we could get so caught up in these boxes of like, you're the enemy, and like all your people are bad and like complicit. And it's like, how do I hold the multiple truths of, yes, white people as a collective have done harm to lots of people, and white people as a collective have done lots of things that are abolitionist and like other kinds of things. And what about just the one-on-one encounters where how can we just appreciate the simplicity and beauty of life sometimes? And I think I'm trying to hold all of that complexity.
and I think that's what gets tricky for me sometimes, for lots of people, in terms of, you said something at the beginning of like, I just want it to be neat, right? Like that pull, that habit, whatever that is, that's like, can't it just be simple? Can't it just be this or that? Like, because that would be so much neater. And when the world is so messy, when our lives can be messy in different seasons, like the desire for something to just be simple
Mhm.
is strong. Right. So how do we just create space and emotional resilience? It, for me, so much of this comes back to like our ability to tolerate distress, right?
Yeah,
It's like, if it
absolutely.
doesn't make sense intellectually, and then I have so many complicated feelings about it. This is being informed by by Pride Month and all that brings up in terms of my sexuality and what pride means to me. So, right, like this desire for things to be simple. But when things are complicated intellectually, emotionally, logistically,
Yeah,
how do we grow our ability to just sit with that rather than like be
yeah.
impulsive or fall back in the binary or
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think like my daily meditation practice and like all the informal practices help me keep unpacking these stories that I tell myself, right? So when I think about, these interactions I have with people and my interpretation that it's anti-Black, that it's anti-queer, um, like that I can hold that could be true, and I don't need to dehumanize this person
right,
who I'm experiencing as, having these ideas, right? It's like, how do we dismantle the ideas and these systems while humanizing people? And I think like that starts with me, right? And how do I show up for all of the Black people, all the queer people, all the marginalized people who maybe don't have the resources or the emotional
that's
capacity
right,
at this time to be in relationship with these people who are on a continuum of harm, of causing harm, right? Whether it's they're explicitly um, like doing things that are harmful, or they're passively going along with the systems
right,
that are causing the harm. And so like, how do I hold that complexity? Which I think it's like, I think about in different seasons of my life when I've been less resourced, I've been more stressed, I've been more tired, I've been more like financially insecure. Like it's harder to show
yeah,
up with open-heartedness,
yeah,
with curiosity, with compassion. And I think about like, how does unresolved trauma show up in these things, right? That's been passed down through generations, right? And so like, how do we think about this nation is incredibly traumatized, started out of trauma, and
yeah,
has passed down that trauma,
right, like that's our origin story.
right? That we
Um,
don't acknowledge enough, right? That indigenous people were traumatized, the white people who colonized here were traumatized, the
yeah,
enslaved people here were traumatized, like
right,
everybody traumatized.
totally. And trauma is a really nice thing to bring up here, because for me, that immediately takes me more into a less personalized place, and a more, I can understand what's going on here, right? When we think about it through that trauma lens. Um, we had a babysitter yesterday for Pride Parade, and she was going to be here for a long time. Because and anyway, it was the first, I didn't come out to her in that we didn't discuss it, but I had on a shirt that said I just look straight. And so it was her first time meeting me in the wholeness of my sexual identity. And like I said, it's been a tough couple of months. There's been a lot churning in good and interesting and deep, meaningful ways this month, but there's been a lot churning this month in terms of unpacking things. And so she is usually very smiley. and like engaging and sweet and whatever. And she was kind of flat, kind of wide-eyed, didn't smile, was less engaging. And I immediately started to get worried that I was being judged. And then again, brought into that binary of like, oh my God, I like, and then like, wait, no, that's wrong of her. And like pulled into this binary. And it took Nick saying to me, like, she probably just needs a minute, Colleen, or maybe this has nothing to do with you. Maybe this has nothing to do with you, but B, she also just might need a minute. Because who knows how much exposure she has to people who are not straight. So like, just maybe like give her a minute. And 5 minutes later, she was back. But right, like this idea of traumatic narratives that we've all heard, internalized, whatever. Yeah, I just lost my train of thought.
But it's interesting to think about how this idea of sometimes people need a minute.
Sometimes people need a minute.
Right? Yeah. Or maybe they need a year, right? Like I just think about how, you know, a couple of weeks ago, was it just last week? 2 weeks ago, my dad came to visit from North Carolina, and I had shared with him ahead of time, like, there's some gender fluidity happening, can you try to use these pronouns, this name? And, he needs a minute to kind of, he's not going to say he needs a minute, but I know he needs a minute based on some of his interactions. And I was like, it'd be really helpful if you told your sibling who you're coming down with to visit. And I remember he said something about like, oh, times have changed and we're not so judgmental. And like, I don't think it's a secret that like, I think like he and his siblings are incredibly judgmental when it comes to like living outside of the binary. Right. But it's so interesting, like his reality is that they're not so judgmental, but my reality is like, you're incredibly judgmental because you push back against things that are not in the binary. So like, but to recognize that certain generations, certain groups of people, certain people just need a minute or two or 100 to wrap their minds around this different reality, especially if they don't have proximity to that difference on an everyday basis.
Totally. And I think it's so easy, again, being more on like the progressive side of things, trying to like learn and whatever. I think it's so easy to be like, you over there have to like take a minute and get your head in straight. But it's like, I too have to take a minute, right? Like, because I contribute to falling in the binary. And when we fall in the binary, we're going to blame or shame. And that means we're going to judge ourselves or other people. And that's going to create conflict. And because we're going to all be in a stress response, right? So such a powerful reminder for me and for any of our listeners who maybe are more progressive or liberal or, open-hearted, whatever. Like, it's not just other people's job to take, right? Like I too have to offer grace, have to offer time, have to offer patience. And it's multifaceted, right? Because that doesn't mean I've got to endure abuse. That doesn't mean anybody's got to endure abuse.
No.
But like, again, multiple truths. It's not just you're wrong and I'm right, or, maybe we can all tolerate some distress, which would allow time to thing. And we see what happens when time passes.
Yeah, because the reality is we change in relationships, right? And so what do we need to do? What's the work we have to do inside of ourselves? Think back to the title of this podcast, right? To rest and awaken. Like, for me, resting is about resourcing, right? It's about regrouping. It's about not being on automatic pilot. And it's just being, which allows me to heal from perhaps some of my trauma, my conditioning, and the ways in which I can be in the binary or be more vulnerable to being in the binary. And then what are the ways I need to awaken, even to that people are processing things at a different rate than I am. And that doesn't mean that they're not doing the work. It's just they're moving at a different pace, right? They have a different learning style. If we go back to neurodiversity, they have a different learning style, right? And so I appreciate the people who says it takes like 3,000 reps for it to be embodied, right? And so that's not going to happen without exposure.
Totally. This makes me think so much of my husband. We're just forever like, and it's like, just let go a little bit. And,
Yeah.
you know, right. And for me, that's like, I can decide, and I can constantly reassess, but like I can decide in this moment and feel grounded in Nick is my person, and he's a good one because he's so open and willing to learn and willing to listen and to sit with it. So like I don't have to constantly hold his feet to the fire. Maybe part of my job is in the letting go and letting him have his process that I don't have to like control and micromanage and stay on top of, right? Like I can just have some trust and have some faith and let time do its thing.
Yeah. Yeah, what a gift.
It's so hard.
Yeah, it really is. But yeah, I mean, I hope that we'll continue this conversation around like how do we do our own work to allow, not even to allow, like to support people on their journey, especially the people who really matter to us, who we are already in relationship with. How do we, let go of those who really don't serve us and figure out who do we still need to be in relationship with, because this is a stage of conflict or transformation or stuckness that could shift.
That's right. It's like the people that are just like toxic and abusive and bad, like maybe that's one end of the binary, that's easy, and are like our people that are like friendly and safe and affirming, that's easy. But there's all these other folks,
like the 50% there.
Right. And what is our individual role with them? And how do we show up in relationship with them in a way that keeps us safe, but also doesn't necessarily cut off entirely?
That's a good non-binary way of ending our time together.
Wow. Cool.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Nathalie.
Thanks, Colleen.
Talk soon.